I will say this as someone who works in maltreatment in sport every day, okay? I work in the bad side of sport every day. I believe in sport is a beautiful place to raise our children when we have the right philosophy and attitude around it. I have hockey coaches and soccer coaches who will not bench young players for horrible behavior because, wait for it, they're my best player and we need them to play. What message do we think we are not just sending our children, but these are developing brains? The message we are sending children is that you can get away with bad things because you're a good athlete. How are we, as parents, contributing to the positive culture of sport? And how could we, even non-intentionally, be contributing to the negative culture? Because there is some bad things happening in sport, and we are all responsible to shift them. When I got into the work with that sport, what we quickly uncovered was there was a lot of parent bullying going on, a lot of coach bullying going on, and a lot of club-to-club competition going on. Where do we think these kids learn this from? They learn it from us.
Those are powerful words from a woman who has become a very powerful voice in Canadian sport and beyond. And as you will soon find out, Allison Forsyth is aptly named because she is an absolute force when it comes to working toward the betterment of the sport environment at all levels across this country. Hello, my name is Scott Rentoul, and I am the host of this podcast, Better Sports Parents. And like you, I am a sport parent. And like you, I am trying to navigate this complicated world of youth sports, one that is far more complicated than when I and probably you were growing up. And like you, I don't have all of the answers, but I am learning. And my hope is that you will too, because what I do have is access to some of the best athletes that we've been able to see in our lifetime, both on a world-class level, a professional level, and those athletes want to share what they've learned. They don't have all of the answers either. And the people that you will hear on this podcast are navigating this youth sports environment just like you. But what they do have is qualified perspectives. And my hope is that this podcast can be a resource for you and other parents in hearing those perspectives, some of which you will resonate with and some which probably don't land with you. But by hearing these qualified perspectives and learning from these athletes who have gone to the highest level and have seen what works for athletes and for children at every level in sport, not to make them excellent, but to make them strong, capable adults. Yes, some of them may go on to professional sports, but that's not the ultimate goal of why we put our kids in youth sports. The name Better Sports Parents can be a little misleading. I think many people think that it's to single out and point out those awful sports parents that we've heard about or maybe seen, the ones causing fights in the stands or berating children in the hallways or maybe going after a referee. We can all see that behavior. But what Better Sports Parents really gets at, for me and hopefully for you, is that as we go on this journey through youth sports with our kids, we can all be better sports parents, a little bit better every day, every week, every month, every year. And if we do that, we will get better sports environments and better sports experiences for our kids. And that is the ultimate goal, which brings me to Allison Forsyth. She is as accomplished as you will find in so many different levels of sport. She was twice an Olympian, though only got to compete in one Olympics because an injury forced her to miss the 2006 games in Torino, but she did compete in Salt Lake. She was a Canadian champion in skiing 8 times over. She is also the survivor of sexual abuse through sport, and she has used that to catapult her into safe sport. And she is now a foremost expert on safe sport in this country, if not the world. So Allison Forsyth, for me, is an excellent place to begin this podcast because at the foundational level, when we put our kids in sport, we want to believe and we need to know that they are entering safe and healthy sporting environments. So without further ado, a foremost expert, a mother of three, Allison Forsyth. Enjoy. Allison, thank you very much for doing this.
Thank you for having me, Scott.
You're welcome. Let's start here. Why are you passionate about youth sports?
Oh, many reasons. I have three kids who participate in sports. I don't like to identify as I have three athletes. We can talk about that later. But I have three kids who love playing sports that are highly competitive. I was obviously a youth athlete and an athlete up to the professional Olympic level. And then in the work I do, I am super passionate about how everyone works within a sport culture, what safe sport is, ultimately creating positive, strong, thriving cultures for youth sport.
Let's go back to when you started your sports journey that is culminated, at least at this point, with what you just described. What did your childhood look like with respect to sports, Allison?
Oh, it was so fascinating, to be honest, because I grew up on Vancouver Island, and there is now that I live in Ontario, I can call it a mountain, but there is a smaller mountain on Vancouver Island, called Mount Washington, and my childhood was exceptional. Skiing and alpine skiing is one of those sports that can be a lifestyle sport for families. So, my parents started the ski club way back in about 1980. Back then, if you skied, you raced. So I sort of naturally went into the sport. We grew up there. There was no, wait for it, no TVs, no phones, no nothing. So we had to, ski in and out of our place. We cross country skied in the afternoon to visit friends. I was very fortunate that my career started as a kid, growing up on Mount Washington in very much a lifestyle of skiing as opposed to a direct, you know, now that direct high performance channeling of sport at a young age.
It sounds very much like sports were part of your entire family's lifestyle. Was alpine skiing and cross country skiing, were those the only things you participated in, or were you very diverse in your sporting interests?
Yeah, it's interesting. My brother, so I'm the youngest of three. My brother, who is 4 years older than me, was also on the national team and went Div 1 for alpine skiing. So I came through a family dynamic of ski racers, and people used to ask me, like, "Did you look up to an Olympian?" I said, "No, I just kind of wanted the same outfit my brother had." And that's true. And we need to remember that kids are simple. And I would see my brother make the next level of sport and get this really cool jacket. And I was like, that's what I want. But skiing took up a lot of my life, but I am also, I guess, of that generation and still that deep belief around multi-sport. The media couldn't believe it when I started to do well in Europe because I told them and was quite honest that I only actually trained on Saturday and Sunday because that's when we went to the mountain. But I did by the age of around 11 or 12 start traveling and training for skiing extensively, which prevented me from taking part in any other weekend sport, right? Because we had to go away for the whole weekend.
The one thing I do know about skiing is that it only happens in Canada in the winter for the most part until you get into the dry land and all of that. So, what were you doing in the summer? What were you doing in those shoulder seasons?
Shockingly not. I was water skiing. So I did quite a bit of water skiing as a kid. In the summer, I mean, right by the age of 12 or 13, I was also skiing in the summer because that happens in certain areas. But I mean, I had a childhood that was around boating, water skiing, and just doing a ton of really fun activities, not necessarily organized sport. My only real organized sport was skiing.
What was your parents' approach to your involvement in sport? Was it just because of the lifestyle? Was it more directed than that? How much did they actively participate?
I think about this a lot and I talk to folks about this a lot. My mom, who is now passed, I wish I could share this with her, but she is probably what I would consider an excellent sport parent. Her thing was if you're in it, you're in it. So what that taught me was commitment. It taught me that I had to say no to a lot of sleepover birthday parties on the weekends. It was about participation, work ethic, committing to something for a full season. And ironically, and we're taking us way back to the 80s here, we would sit down as a family before every season and talk about if I wanted to continue. And that was huge because that I felt empowered to make a choice. And if I chose to ski race, then I knew what that meant, which was commitment, effort, hard work. But what she never did was ever talk about winning. Not once did I feel from, and I say my mom, my dad was there, but my mom was really that, passionate sport person in our family. And not once did I ever feel pressure to win or perform well. I just felt, and as I encourage everyone in parenting now, that what my mom expected of me is what we should expect of all of our children around the life lessons of committing to sport and participating and being a good teammate. She was pretty ruthless with that, but never once did she care if I came first or last.
Was she one of your coaches, or was she simply your champion from the sidelines or slope side, if you will?
Just slopeside. She was the president of the ski club for many years, the powerful volunteer mom doing it all. She also was herself a professional figure skater way back in the days of the ice capades. And so that was her sport. So she did come from a competitive sport background. But she was just an incredible cheerleader and honestly a champion of all the kids in the club, which I think was really cool.
It's interesting that you say she came from a skating background and obviously skated at a very high level, yet never felt compelled, at least based on what you just said, to push you in that direction. Did you have
Mm.
any urge to go that way?
I did kind of go that way, Scott. It didn't work out well because I am not flexible, nor am I have the genetic makeup of a figure skater, which we could talk about at length on your podcast. Um, it is important to understand the genetics and the abilities of your kid, and maybe when you want them to do a certain sport, but they don't have a natural aptitude for that sport. So I did go into figure skating, and I did not like it. And she did coach me a little bit. I just said, "I wanna be a skier." And she was like, "Great." But I can tell you that was a great decision because I am not graceful. And I just was much more suited to the, aptitude of skiing.
We can certainly talk about the competitive part of skiing, but as you just said, you enjoyed it. And that's what caused you to go in that direction originally. What are some of your fondest memories of those early days of skiing? What did you actually like about it?
I was training to be an Olympic skier without knowing it, and I'll give you some examples. Mount Washington at that time was release your kid on the mountain and everyone will take care of everyone, and we got bored. So I actually only trained on Sundays, 1 day a week. On Saturdays, what we would do, because we wanted to, was spend the whole day on one ski, okay? So we would go, it's left ski Saturday, me and my friends, or it's right ski Saturday. The other thing we did very regularly was ski without poles. Now the really fun thing we did, which I guarantee is not allowed anymore, is we would go up the lift on our cross country skis. We would tie them underneath, tie our boots to our skis, and we would telemark. So I am not kidding you. When I was on the national team, we started to do drills where we would go through a slalom course on one ski. Okay. So this was a drill. This was, let's see if we can do a slalom. And my coaches would say to me, Allison, you might be better on one ski than two. And that's when I clicked in, to be honest, Scott. And I so think we need to think about that as parents. There is so many ways to train for your chosen sport without doing, especially at a young age, personal training, organized dry land. I grew up non-intentionally training my balance, my endurance by having fun on a mountain.
I'm so glad you brought that up. You basically took the words right out of my mouth because there's so much organized sport
Mm.
with today's youth that I think we miss out at times on the creative aspect of it. And it sounds to me like that creative aspect that you and your friends had on the mountain when you were just goofing around really helped you in your pursuit of what ultimately was a realized Olympic dream.
Yeah, and I'm now a high level coach myself in skiing and in hockey. I am a strength and conditioning coach. And with my own kids, we just spent the weekend in Collingwood. My boys both play a very high level of hockey, and they went tubing. And when I watched my son just leaning into that tube, and he's gripping those handlebars, I looked at that and I said to my girlfriend I was with, who has a boy playing hockey, and I said, that is grip strength. That is a stick. You see where I'm going with this? They have debunked just the myth that young kids shouldn't lift weights. Okay. That's been debunked scientifically. I will not, nor have I allowed my now U15 hockey player into the gym till this summer. I'm just putting it in perspective. because he had to learn how his body moves. He had to learn how to be a kid. And now, well, he's going into U15 is the first time that I'm going to actually put him in a gym to lift weights.
Well, and that's a real part of the youth sport development and athletic development in general is not just the creative aspect of it, but trying, failing, seeing what works, and then at those rare moments when inspiration strikes during an organized sporting event, now all of a sudden you incorporate that naturally.
Absolutely. And I would say, based on my experience in strength and conditioning and biomechanics, there's a big difference between ability and skill. So here's what I'm seeing real time play out in very high level hockey in Ontario when I'm coaching or working with teams. You will have children that are highly skilled in hockey because they've been on the ice a lot since they were very young, but they may not have the natural ability for hockey. They may be better suited to cross country skiing. And at some point, you know what I'm going here? This levels out. I believe and I build long-term athlete development plans, and I can tell you firsthand how challenging it has been for me in the hockey system with I am in to keep my kids on it. Because nobody in my experience right now wants to stay on a long-term athlete development plan based on the pressure that we can feel as parents to keep up with the Joneses. If, that boy over there is playing soccer 6 days a week, then my son has to play soccer 6 days a week. So I will be the first to tell you to, like, hold on, because what happens when you're on this beautiful 45-degree long-term athlete development plan is their ability will take them where they need to go at the right time. But you have to be committed and not fall into the trap of overtraining at a young age.
Well, you just said it. And there are those that think more of one thing and obsession with one thing is better, but that's largely been debunked by a lot of different scientists, a lot of different research studies, and the risk of burnout relative to the risk of success to me does not equate. And the risk of burnout is so much higher, in my opinion. Do you see the same thing and do you feel the same way?
I see real time because I train high level hockey players off ice. I see in real time massive hip issues, patella tendon issues. I see athletes who are 14 years old who have skated their whole life that can't execute a proper squat because their knees track in. So not only do I see emotional burnout and kids not having fun and feeling very overpressured by parents, I see kids damaging their body by only doing the one repetitive movement over and over again.
You mentioned the word pressure there,
Mhm.
and it's one that comes into youth sports a lot right now. To go back to your own childhood, when do you think you started to feel pressure?
Here's the thing. We are dealing with Generation Alpha now who are very empowered. I'll get to my point. I was an athlete with a personality type. Most athletes that make it in sport tend to be a bit more A type, hard on themselves, perfectionists, fear of failure. Okay. This is who we are as people. And if we already feel that about ourselves, which is why the pressure I felt was what I put on myself, then if we have a coach or a parent layer it on, it can be devastating to our confidence. The example I'll use is my son's the same way, is only responded now 95% of children respond to only positive reinforcement coaching. I was one of those kids in the '80s who was very much a positive reinforcement athlete because I was so hard on myself to begin with. What I see around pressure is we will, as a sports society, I mean, I felt pressure from my whole country at the Olympics. We will put that on a child thinking that it's going to motivate them. The reality is kids are self-motivated more than ever, and you do have to have an inner grit, resilience, and drive to be the best. That does never will come from a parent. Sorry, but it won't. I already know my 2 boys have very different personalities, and they will be unlikely to watch or listen to this podcast. My second son has it, and my first doesn't. And what do I mean by that? My second son has Right now, he's extremely hard on himself. He guts it out. He has grit. He has a fear of failure. I have parented both my boys exactly the same. So if you were to ask me which one of my sons had a likelihood to make it would be my second son based on who he actually is as a person. So I think that's also really important just to understand is your personality types of your children.
It's a really good point, as is the one that you made about following your children as opposed to the other way around. And you were parented that way by your mother. She followed your direction and supported you in that journey, as opposed to saying, you're going to be a skater. We're going to make you a skater because I was a skater and I know how to make a great skater. Who else showed that belief in you, showed that positive reinforcement that had you fall in love with skiing along the way?
In alpine skiing, we don't actually at that time and still you don't actually start racing till you're almost 11 and 12. So I did not know how good I was. I have memories of being at the, like, Black Diamond and everyone staring at me, and I was like, "What are you all looking at?" Then I realized I was 5, right? Like, I think a lot of other people recognized I was very strong in skiing far before I did because I wasn't competing. And what I had was this person, and he's still in my life, and his name's Peter Gibson. He was the highest level ski instructor at Mount Washington, and so suddenly it was almost, well, maybe, Allison and a couple other of these better skiers should spend the afternoon with me. But what we did was go to the most extreme stuff and just ski. So honestly, I did not like skiing. This might come as a curveball. Skiing and racing was the sport my family did. So if you were to ask me now at my age, I do ski, but it's my passion for skiing was all about the competition, all about the drive, the pushing myself to be the best at something. And why I think that's important is because when I was in skiing, I kind of wanted to do other things that I didn't have access to. So I had kind of a resentment for my sport. But here's my point. It wasn't until I was 15 years old that it kicked in. My self-drive, okay, I want to do dry land, and at that point, I and everyone started to recognize how good I could be, and that's when a lot of other people started to come in to support me on my journey, but not until I was 15, and that's where I think my first son is at, is he's now about to turn 15, and I'm like, "He's either gonna kick in or he's not," but I am not gonna push that kid to do things he doesn't wanna do. If he doesn't wanna go for a 5-kilometer run, he won't. Because guess what? He's not gonna make the NHL unless he decides one day to get up and go for that run himself, right? We can't push him there. It doesn't work.
No, we can't. And it's really interesting that you throw that curveball of you didn't love skiing. And yet every year your parents would sit down, you would have a family discussion, and they would say, do you want to continue to do this? Looking back, why is it that you think you chose to continue to pursue despite the fact that you didn't love the sport at a very early age?
To be honest, Scott, it was what the family did. I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm saying it was our family sport, and if I had said, "No, I don't wanna ski," everyone else would have been at the mountain. So I didn't have an experience of saying, "I wanna go play volleyball, now you have to help me go play volleyball." However, I will tell you that I always wanted to be in a team sport, and if I could go back in time, like, no way would I be a good volleyball player, but I love that sport. Like, there's sometimes we're just channeled into certain sports for certain reasons. I don't regret any of it. But again, it wasn't a love of skiing. It was a love of sport and competitive sport that got me to the Olympics.
You might not have been an Olympian in volleyball, but I feel like you still would have been a very good volleyball player, Allison.
Well, we would see. I mean, what's so funny, Scott, is I think something really cool is when you get to the Olympic level of sport, in our sport, you travel all the time with all the other countries, right? And we all did intramurals together, volleyball, soccer, all these things. Now, here's the funny thing is you have the top 10 best skiers in the world. When you went to go play those intramurals, regardless of what it was usually the exact same people that were good at all those other sports too. What that should tell us is that is the ability for sport. That is I'm an athletic person based on genetics. We try to turn kids into something they're just not. But when you look at the volleyball court with us playing Germany, I could literally be like, "Oh, those girls are ranked top 10 in the world, and they're the best volleyball players on the German ski team." Interesting, right?
Doesn't surprise me. There are very few athletes that get to the level you're talking about that aren't able to translate or transfer many of their skills to other athletic endeavors as well. And it's part of the reason I personally believe in a multi sport approach. I think you do as well. You mentioned you have boys and they're very involved in hockey. What sports did they play growing up? I know they're still growing up, but at a very early age, what sports were they in?
Yeah, so I have 2 boys and a girl, so 14, 11, and 8 years old. My girl's the 8-year-old. So the girl, picked competitive cheer. They pick. My kids pick, and that sport is unique. That sport is interesting. That sport is one that I never would have considered I'd be into because I'm not good at doing makeup at 5 AM. But there's like, the work I do in safe sport, there's good things about every sport and there's not so good things. And if she wants to do cheer, she's going to cheer. Now the boys, I actually do believe really strongly in gymnastics at a young age to build an athletic foundation for injury prevention. Number one. Does that make sense? Like,
It does.
let's get these kids out there using only their body weight, doing some chin ups, climbing those ropes. Like, that's just cool foundational sports stuff. And my older son became a competitive tumbler. And we were living in North Vancouver and he was 8 years old. And what was he doing? Flipping a whole lot on the trampoline. We went to Ontario and right away they like plucked him. You know what I mean? Like they were like, "Oh, you're good." And they said to me, "Where has he been training?" I said, "For gymnastics?" They said, "Yes." And I said, On our backyard trampoline." So that tells you like that's just the athletic aptitude. So he did competitive tumbling, which I loved. This is where my 10-year-old could do 20 back handsprings in a row. And I remember saying to my husband, I'm like, well, if nothing else, he's going to be the cool kid at the college party that can throw down a backflip, right? So they played anything they want. My middle son, Carter, he somehow landed in lacrosse because that's what his hockey buddies were playing. And that's a cross sport for hockey. He was good. One of the top teams in Ontario for his age. And then he came to me one day and said, "I don't really like lacrosse and I want to play baseball." And me and his dad were like, "Urgh." No judgment on baseball parents, but I want to chew my arm off about 2 innings in. I'm a high adrenaline speaker, talker. I have ADD. Like watching a baseball game is really rough for me. But I said, "Great." So he quit lacrosse and let me remind us all he was one of the best teams in Ontario. The coach, who was lovely, just kind of though looked at me and was like, "No one quits this team." And I said, "Well, he wants to try baseball." And we went out for a year of house baseball because I didn't want my son to ever grow up and go into a therapy session and say, all I want to do is be a baseball player and my mom wouldn't let me. And I don't want to say this, baseball parents, but I'm kind of glad he didn't love it. So that was that. But my kids now, they do flag football, they do anything fun because where they're at in their hockey journey now is they do play quite a bit of hockey, and I'm just mindful of how much their body is working, if that makes sense.
As we're going to get into further in this conversation, you are highly trained as a coach. You've been at the top level as an athlete. You are one of the foremost experts in this country, if not the world, in safe sports. So your background is deep and it is very steep as well. What do you want your boys to get out of sports? And your daughter, of course. I know she's at a younger age.
I will say this as someone who works in maltreatment in sport every day, okay? I work in the bad side of sport every day. I believe in sport is a beautiful place to raise our children when we have the right philosophy and attitude around it. When the way that I look at it, I'm not saying I'm perfect, that's for sure. There's been many car rides where I'm gritting my teeth because I kind of want to get really mad at how my boys played. But I want my kids to look back and say, I loved being an athlete when I was younger. I do not want my kids to ever feel like I know many athletes feel that if they didn't make it or don't make it, they've let their parents down. They feel less of themselves. So I want my kids to gain all the skills in sport that has nothing to do with two things: winning or making it to a professional level. Everything else is the beautiful part of sport for me. And I do see a lot of bad things happen in sport, but further, I myself, I have a very big network, obviously, of Olympians and professional athletes. And, the identity crisis is real, which is why I also challenge parents to say, I'm not raising an athlete. That's a label. You see that everywhere on Instagram. Raising, even worse, raising a high performance athlete. Yeah, we're not going there till you're on the national team. I'm sorry. Does that make sense? Like, we got to stop that language. You're raising a child who loves sports and is competitive in sports. There's a big difference there. Yeah.
There's a massive difference there. And there's also a massive difference in what making it means. And I know within the context of your answer, you were referring to making it to a professional hockey team or a professional sport level. But my personal view, and I hope more people will adopt this, and that's part of the reason behind the podcast, is that making it is having a positive experience in sport, incorporating activity and movement into your everyday healthy lifestyle, because that's, as parents, I hope what we're trying to build: healthy people, independent people who are going to be strong in so many respects of their personalities and their lifestyle, so then when they do get to our age, they are still active and they are healthy. And we know what sport and activity does for your mental health as well as for your physical health. Do we not need to redefine, as parents? I'm not pointing the finger at anyone else other than myself here, what making it actually means.
Oh, I always have a story for everything, but I did the grind the other day. And every time I go to the gym or I exercise now, the level of gratitude that I have for myself and my experience in sport, for muscle memory, for just being, and that's actually the other thing I want for my kids. I want them to be my age and still be able to move their body and function and do things like the gross grind if they choose to. That's what I think it's all about, is getting these kids to be fit and move and get a little less screen time and all of these things. And when we get trapped into the pressure of the society of sport, right? We could say as parents we do it, but we have to acknowledge, don't get me started on Div 1 and the NIL and all of this stuff. The pressure of sport society on making it is extreme, and we all have to push back against that.
We do. And part of the reason that we've launched this podcast is that we want to give parents this type of perspective. And we want this to be a resource for parents so that they can breathe a little bit in this high pressure environment they are a part of as well, and realize that they are empowered to help make this a better environment for their children. From your experience, both as a mother and as someone who has dedicated her life to sport in so many different ways, I know this is a loaded question, Allison, but what are the biggest issues that you currently see with youth sports?
So, in the work I do, in safe sport, I work on all forms of maltreatment in sport, everything from sexual violence and consent to bullying in dressing rooms. The challenge that I feel we have in sport right now around youth, the biggest issue I see, to be honest, is athlete to athlete maltreatment, through sport cultures that are toxic, through sport cultures that reperpetrate past issues. Hockey is the most challenging sport I work with. I'll just say it. And I say that with having my boys in it and loving the sport. That connotation, especially if you have a high performance, deemed high performance athlete at a young age, it's that there is the good culture of sport and there's the bad culture. We cannot deny that bad things happen in sport. Um, and what we need to do as parents is just to respect that our job and what we're here for is to harness, thrive, and reperpetrate the positive aspects of the culture of sport. And what we have to be very mindful of, very, very mindful of, is when children get assimilated into the negative side of the culture of sport. When the peer pressure pulls them in, when they feel like they have to fit in over belong, when there's an encouragement of this culture, even from us parents. So, what I mean by that is, how are we as parents contributing to the positive culture of sport? And how could we, even non intentionally, be contributing to the negative culture? Because there is some bad things happening in sport, and we are all responsible to shift them.
There's a lot to unpack with that answer. Let's start with what you said off the top, which is athlete to athlete maltreatment. Can you give me an example of what that looks like?
Yep. So, in safe sport, I'll be really quick, but there's two different categories of maltreatment us as parents need to think about and understand. One is predatorial abuse. And if you do my education, you'll get a lot of this understanding. But that's what happened to me as a survivor of sexual abuse in sport. I was groomed by a predator. That's what some people think safe sport is. Now, on the other side is the normalization of maltreatment, which is where the cultural stuff that has been accepted largely over time, that's where that lives. What we see currently as the biggest challenge in safe sport is athlete to athlete maltreatment, bullying, hazing, online abuse. Most prominent online is distribution of sexually explicit materials. I work on cases of things such as death threats in Snapchat, photography, dupes, deep fakes. This is all language that your kids know if you don't, and I challenge you to figure it out. But we are all contributing to that. I'll give you an example. So I was contacted by Canadian Artistic Swimming, synchro, don't know anything about it. And they said, Allison, we have a bullying problem. And I said, well, you have largely female identifying athletes who are jockeying for positions in pools. They're all wearing the same stuff. Like, that's an inherent risk in your sport, in all sports, because kids are competitive. When I got into the work with that sport, what we quickly uncovered was there was a lot of parent bullying going on, a lot of coach bullying going on, and a lot of club to club competition going on. Where do we think these kids learn this from? They learn it from us. Further, when I work on cases, I watch Live Barn. Hockey families will know what this is. These are cameras set up in rinks. When something bad happens, I get a lot of footage from soccer on the VO cameras that everyone has. We've done a lot of work now to identify elevation. So harm progresses and harm elevates. When we as parents make a decision, usually from our passion, we're so passionate to start yelling and screaming at referees or other kids or other coaches. When that happens, what we need to understand is that that will very likely lead to kids fighting, coaches, like there's this elevation. And I wish it was the other way around, but this elevation in the environment that leads to harm and sometimes really bad harm can start with the parents screaming at refs, at coaches. Not only does that, and I'll be honest, I mean, I'm not trying to tell everyone how to parent, but I know this very clearly from the work I do. Not only does that contribute to a toxicity with the kids on the field, but it also contributes to setting a example of what abuse looks like for our children. Because when we are as parents yelling and screaming at referees in hockey, that is verbal abuse. I'm sorry. I can throw you the definition anytime you want. But what I consistently hear from parents, even within my own kids' teams, if they feel like, wait for it, that's just hockey. And they have a right to do this because that's the hockey culture. And this is the problem because all that has happened is we now know what maltreatment is. We know the effects of maltreatment, which is trauma. We know how kids who are traumatized and referees who are traumatized, coaches who are traumatized, how they will then deal with that trauma through coping mechanisms. So a lot of this is just we know better now, so let's do better. And we have to get out of, well, that's just how sport is, Allison, you know?
I'm with you entirely. And it boggles my mind that a parent who is at any type of game for his or her children thinks that it is acceptable to talk to a referee or a child on the other team, let alone yell at them. I can't think of a situation where there's an actual good reason for a parent to be talking. to any of those participants. Is that not what a coach is for? To be the direct line of communication with players and referees? Is there any reason that parents should ever engage in that type of behavior, let alone elevate it, as you just talked about?
No. But here's the thing. I have empathy for us parents, especially us parents that feel like we've been pigeonholed into keeping up with the Joneses. And what I mean by that is that pressure that we can feel, like I mentioned earlier, that if my son isn't playing hockey 5 to 6 days a week, he's not going to make the next level because everyone else's son is playing hockey 5 or 6 days a week. So, what does that mean? It means that I then quite literally am in my pickup truck from 3 p.m. to 9 p.m. every day driving around. It also means that I am being told that I have to be in a sport environment 5 to 6 days a week. So, why this matters is we are told and we do choose to invest a ton of time into this. So, it's not abnormal. I have PhD researchers doing a project right now called, part of my language here, but why are sport parents losing it? Because I'm like, we're all actually good people. Why are we acting the way we're acting? As a general, honestly, like a pretty generalized statement. And a big part of it is asking ourselves as parents, do we need to watch every practice? The reduction in harm, it's going to be obvious. I know there was a lot going on during COVID, but if you ask any sport what the best coaching time was, it was during COVID. And why? Because the parents weren't there. And I completely respect, especially what happened to me, that we want to monitor our children these days, that we're trying to raise them differently. We want to fill up their Gatorades for them, whatever that may be. But when we as parents are constantly in the environment, it is very normal for us to start to think we can do things better than the coaches. So what do I do to combat that? I never watch my kids practice hockey. I drop them off. I go and get groceries and I come back and pick them up and I ask them how it was. What that prevents me from doing is watching, being disappointed, and then feeling a pull to car coach. Car coaching is when we get our kids in the car and we get mad at them for what they did. So I'm not there. You see, like sometimes we have to just acknowledge the best thing for me to do my child is to not watch the game, to not watch the practice. And then naturally, what will happen in my experience is we will get our child back and we will ask questions. How'd it go? How did it feel? Did you have fun? Why? Because we didn't see it. That's an interesting trick that I highly recommend. If you feel yourself like that kind, you can't help but be that kind of parent, just don't watch. Let the coach do their job. Trust your kid.
You mentioned a couple of unintentional behaviors that can contribute to unsafe sport or maltreatment or elevation. You mentioned that with talking to referees or other kids. You mentioned it with watching every single practice. Are there any other points you can point out for parents right now, unintentional behaviors that they may not realize are contributing to a detrimental sport environment for their own child and other children around them?
Yeah, so recently we received the verdict of the Hockey Canada case. Now, that is a big thing. And for me, it was a very big thing as a survivor. I educate on this all the time. Here's what I would highly suggest we consider is that harm elevates and escalates. And when we teach children who are good athletes that they can get away with bad things, that will elevate. You know where I'm going with this, right? It does not start in the hotel room. It starts when we go to a hockey or a soccer tournament and we feel like we're better than other people. So we let our kids break the hotel rules by playing mini sticks. You see that? It starts when hockey parents go and buy sweatshirts from these kids that say rippin' wristers and wheeling sisters. Now we have choices as parents to go, oh, that's funny. Or whatever, they're gonna go play mini sticks and we're gonna go have a drink in the bar. But if we are not catching the behavior early, when we do not discipline kids for bad behavior in sport as opposed to bad results, you see that? I have hockey coaches and soccer coaches who will not bench young players for horrible behavior because, wait for it, they're my best player and we need them to play. What message do we think we are not just sending our children, but these are developing brains? The message we are sending children is that you can get away with bad things because you're a good athlete. So we have to break it right down to all of that. Like, why should we ever feel that our kids are above anyone or we are above anyone? The rules don't apply to us because we're good athletes, we're hockey parents, we're soccer. Uh-uh. If your kid is not respecting the server in a restaurant, there's a reason why many restaurants don't want sports teams to make reservations. We say in certain sports, hockey being an example, that kids have to wear suits. So why do kids if you ask a coach, why does a kid wear a suit to a hockey game? Well, it shows respect. Okay, so when these kids are in a restaurant and they're throwing crayons and making swamp water, and the server, who's a 20-year-old lovely person, cannot even serve the table, what's a suit gonna do? Right? So we can't tokenize respect. We have to show what it looks like to children. And then guess what does not happen? The hotel room. I'm sorry, but that's the progression of harm. That's where it goes to when we don't shut these things down at a very young age.
Well, it's very consistent with one of the great phrases that I saw on your website. One of the great sentences at Generation Safe is our firm belief is human first, winning second. What should that mean to coaches, organizations, and most importantly, parents?
So I love to use examples. I'm the safe sport officer for Canada Soccer. I went to spend time with our senior women's national team. So this is one of the best teams in the world. We know this. This is the team that had a lot of challenges at the Olympics. We know this. My job is to go in and ensure that the culture is safe, positive, and thriving. So I got to Vancouver and I found out that 3 of our players were welcoming babies this year, either themselves or their partners. I looked at the team manager, she looked at me and she's like, "We need to throw a baby shower." I said, "Yeah, we do." So here's what we need to understand. Is even at the best level, who we were as the best athletes in the world, we need to be treated as humans first. These women got a baby shower. You see? So this is the thing, is that when we and as kids, when we use language like my son plays hockey, not I have a AAA hockey playing son, right? We are also not pigeonholing our own children into a label and into an identification that will likely result in disappointment for them. But we're saying, like, you are a human being, you are beautiful and whole exactly as you are, whether you scored 10 goals this year or none. That's how I believe we raise children to be leaders in this world, not looking at success as winning and losing, but looking at success as raising children in sport is a beautiful place for life skills, all of the things that we know come from sport. But sometimes you got to throw a baby shower, like it's just that simple. And they loved it.
Of course,
Yeah.
because when we look at, if we want to go back to far earlier in their lives, when we look at the data from state of play that Jumpstart put together, you look at it. Why do kids play sports? When you ask them, not why their parents tell you they play sports, because they're fun, because they want to play with their friends, because they want to exercise and be healthy. The competitive part, the winning part, that comes so much later in their rationale. And it comes so much later in their athletic journey. But we forget that somehow. And I do believe that parents, when they first put their children in sport, Allison, I think they have that order right. But it's
Mhm.
really, really soon after that that many of the parents get those items reversed. And the competition becomes far more important than the fun or the friends. And unfortunately, as you said, children model what they see. They know what their parents are doing. How do we keep that perspective where it needs to be longer in a child's athletic journey?
Mm. So you can tell already, Scott, like I'm kind of real, like real conversation assertive. So I always say to parents, play the odds. So playing the odds to me look like the odds of your child ever making, the MLS, the MLB, or the NHL are like 0.00. Give me a percentage, right? Now, if we are that pushing, pressuring, we think it's what's best for our kid, driven parent who maybe wants to live vicariously through our child, I'm not saying that's you. But I find most athletes that do make it in sport do not push their kids because they understand what it takes. Further, those of us that made it in sport also know, and this is key, that even when you are the best athlete in the world, or even when and if you are making millions of dollars a year, there is zero correlation between that and being happy and healthy. Zero. If anything, when mental health started to come into sport, I was friends with Clara Hughes. We were talking and joking because she was doing the Bell Let's Talk campaign. And bless her for coming out with her mental health challenges. But we kind of all looked around. We were all in a gym and we were like, find us an Olympian that doesn't have some challenges. That was 20 years ago. So my point is that I get so passionate about this is that the odds that your child, I truly believe this, and I experienced this, and many athletes have disclosed this, do not make it. But then because they were pushed to make it, feel like they let everyone down. I don't know a parent out there that wants to go through life having their kid feel like they let them down. So we just have to check ourselves because the odds are stacked against that kid making it. Further, the odds, even if they make it, they're not going to be happier or healthier. It just doesn't work that way.
The other thing I know that parents believe when they first take their children to sport and continue to take them back is that they make an assumption that that child is in a safe sport environment. No, that's not always the case. What questions should parents be asking to give them greater confidence that their child is in a safe sporting environment?
Mm. So I was just doing this work today. So I will just share that I am currently building a whole awesome, authentic online platform for education for safe sport. Parents, you will get, wait for it, free, you're welcome, really good safe sport education through my parent modules. But here's the thing, you need to ask questions of your clubs. And the first thing I will tell you, and this is going to be hardcore Allison, never, ever register your child in a rogue league. Ever. What is a rogue league? It is a soccer club who is not under BC Soccer or Ontario Soccer. They are not an affiliate of a governing body. It is a tennis club, an academy started by one person who claims they're the best tennis coach in North Vancouver, therefore send me your child. So why? Because I deal with parents all the time who have unfortunately experiences with their child being harmed by coaches. There is no recourse. There's no recourse. I can't help parents whose child were harmed in a club that's unsanctioned. I can help a parent whose child was harmed in a sanctioned club through safe sport, complaint management, through law enforcement support, all of these things. But the risk you are taking is vast. Last thing I'll say, and I say this with absolute certainty and authenticity because I know if you are dealing with a coach who is a predator, that is someone who is intending to target young people for bad purposes, if they get caught, they will get out of a member association and then they will go and start a private club. Okay. So that's that. Otherwise, does your club even know what safe sport is? Do they talk about it? Is it on the website? Yes, background checks matter. But more importantly, it's like, is there a culture around inclusivity, safety? Is the club, do you feel they're ethical? They're transparent? The last thing I will challenge you on is do not get duped by self proclaiming high performance clubs. It is, part of my language, garbage. And I deal with this in soccer all the time. When a club claims that they're high performance, I say, why? And the answers I get, we bring in the best coaches. But then I say, how do you define best? And they can't. We got the best kids. We train the most. We push them the most. No, there's no such thing. Any child within a club that has a proper setup of rep and house and whatever should be able to succeed. So just be mindful that you're not duped by a club wooing you into we're a high performance club because they're just self-proclaiming that.
And to be clear, there is absolutely no reason that parents across this country shouldn't be talking to their organizations and asking them if they are certified as safe sport and if they have had education from someone like yourself and Generation Safe, correct?
Absolutely. And here's the thing, parents. I said this in the House of Commons in front of the Prime Minister because I am who I am. I said, if you think you're going to solve the problem of maltreatment in sport that's existed since Romans were wrestling with a 60-page policy no one's going to read and a 45-minute online training module no one pays attention to, give your heads a shake. Okay. I then picked up my phone because I am human and you are human. And the way I register my children for sport is I'm clicking through some thing, I'm clicking every green box they're asking me to click. And what I'm clicking through is the code of conduct, the policies, Rowan's Law in Ontario, which is the concussion policy. So that's human nature. So when I work with clubs or organizations, I say you cannot expect parents to have read your 60-page policy. You need to bring that. You have a right that a club enrolls you in the code of conduct. Doesn't just say, oh, you did something yesterday. That's a breach of the code of conduct that you should have known existed. Like you have rights as well. Does that make sense, Scott? Like you can't just, we have to get out of this world of, well, we have a policy for that. Like, no. So the last thing I want to say about like parents and clubs, which I think is really important, is and coaches, and I say this with my own personal experience. A lot of parents come to me asking about what happened to me. I was groomed into a very serious sexual abusive situation, and never, ever let a coach tell you that they're the one that can get your child onto a national team. Coaches should not track kids. It happens all the time where a coach will zone in on one child and say, I'm going to follow this kid because this kid's really good, and I'm going to track them and follow them all the way to the national team. That is really bad. And I'm not only saying because that coach could be grooming and abusive sexually, because what that also is psychological abuse, where a coach feels like they own your child. Let me give you a couple examples, Scott. Sorry, I'm a talker. I'm working now with the sport of gymnastics, and my job is to find inherent risks for maltreatment. My job is to minimize risks before something bad happened. When I walk into a gymnastics club and I have a coach say, that's my athlete, do you see that? That's a problem. No one owns athletes. Further, if a coach ever says, I produced 10 Olympians, let's talk about the word produced. So the language matters. Coaches should only say, well, I coach Allison, and yes, she's a strong athlete, not Allison's my athlete. Isn't it interesting? It happens a lot in individual sports specifically. That's my athlete. Well, no, that's not your athlete. You don't own that person. Yeah.
That's really important language for people to understand, and the nuance involved with that they need to pay attention to. It strikes me that as someone who spent her physical career as an Olympian and a Canadian champion, and then has, as you mentioned, survived sexual abuse, now educates people across the world
Right.
on safe sport, but also has 3 children of her own that she loves being a parent to, that the last thing you needed was to go into coaching yourself, and yet
Mm,
you've done it.
mm.
Why did you choose to get into coaching, Allison, when sport encompasses so much of your life as it is?
So I will preface, I was, trainer, manager, coaching in hockey. I'm a high level alpine ski coach. I got into it because there's a huge gap in coaching in many sports, and it's called socio-emotional coaching. It is the coaching that protects athletes' mental health. It is the type of coaching that treats athletes as humans. It is the type of coaching that knows how to speak to athletes. This is the soft skills. So I coached or have coached hockey, and I don't still really don't know what icing is, and nobody can believe that. But when you have coaching certification programs across this country and all the sports, in my opinion, I will brag on behalf of soccer. I think we do a great job with our diplomas on the human rights of the child and socio-emotional coaching. But if you're a coach as a parent, I want you to ask yourself, how were you trained? Because it's probably technical, tactical, skill based, how to run drills. And what we're missing is how I coach. And I say this with all the humbleness in the world, which is all socio-emotional attitude, treating each other well. What do you do after a goal goes in? How do you restore your confidence? All of this part is desperately needed in coach development.
What criteria do you believe parents should use? Because so often, Allison, it's well, what's the one loss record? How many goals did my child score? But what criteria do you believe parents should use to determine whether or not a coach has done a good job with their children?
Okay, so let's go back to what we know. Children are self-motivated. This is an empowered generation, these alphas. They are going to win if they want to win. Nobody can make them win. So let's start with that. Then I would say what you're looking for in a coach is someone who actually has a meeting with you and asks you this question. This is what I work with coaches on all the time. What would you like your child to get out of rugby this year that has absolutely nothing to do with winning? Most parents get stumped. And I often see parents will come to me directly and say, I don't like my son's coach or my daughter's coach because he didn't actually have a visceral reaction when they lost. So the problem is we feed in, and I see this negative reinforcement, this toughen them up, all of this stuff that we believe too as parents because that's how we might have been coached. We're Gen X's and Y's, we are not alpha. But I will say that it's really critical that we do not get stuck thinking that a coach has to behave a certain way towards winning, results, how many kids they've produced, how many athletes they've gotten onto. This is actually the biggest red flag for parents for potential maltreatment of their child. So that's a big mind shift that I have a lot of respect for. You want coaches that say, I know you wanna win, therefore I wanna win. Last thing, Scott, I work with coaches on this. It's so amazing. Personal responsibility. Think about it, Scott. Coaches need to take more personal responsibility for a loss. They blame coach and they shame coach the kids. I just had to get that out because I have the I have the mic. The power in coaching is when a coach says to a parent, that was not a strong game. This is what I saw your son or daughter and the team do, but guess what? This is how I could have been better. That's how you know you have a great coach.
I agree with you 100%. And it's something I learned a number of years ago and try to reinforce and spread the word on is that when children, athletes succeed, it's because of the hard work they've put in. And when they don't, when they come up short to whatever the expectation they have is, it's because they weren't prepared well enough by their coaches.
And that's why I always say to parents, I'll say it right now, how do you define success for your child in sport? Sit with that. I have no judgment. I'm in it, right? I'm not here to tell you how to parent, please, right? Like I mess things up every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday in some regard. But I will say with my experience in safe sport and with how athletes, what can happen with athletes when they suffer from the identity crisis, and I deal with mental health issues and trauma responses, that just sit with how do I define success in sport for my child? And is it about me or is it about them?
One more question about the coaching role and the interaction with parents that you just mentioned. And I love what you said about the coach who asks parents what they want and then have them do some of that work and help reinforce that work.
Mhm.
Quite often in organizations, regardless of sport, there's a meeting at the beginning of the year, and it might even be on Zoom or some other platform, or it might be a video recording they watch. And then there's not much interaction unless a parent perceives a problem. My child's not playing enough. I don't think my child's developed enough. My child came home complaining, and we're going to do something about this. So, with all that in the background, what does a healthy relationship between parents and a coach actually look like?
Okay, you're gonna get the Cole's Notes version of my How to Create Healthy Parent Relationships module. Every time I do coach development work or safe sport with coaches, parents come into the conversation. Okay. We just need to respect that. We come into the conversation. Right away, I go to the coach and I say, well, how are you earning their respect? Is it assumed or do you take the time to earn it? Because we are Gen X's and we are Gen Y's, and we are not the world of looking at every coach that comes into the door that they're a god. Because if I'm sorry, but if I as a parent get dragged into one more dressing room, which is a confined, unsafe space for a parent meeting that is incredibly poorly organized with no agenda, how in the world do you expect me to respect you? So, my point, I work with coaches on what they need to do. Parent meetings need to have agendas. They need to be planned. I also ask coaches, what are your office hours? So parents, I caution you here, and it's going to be a bit hardcore. I work on parental harassment complaints. What that is when an organization actually has a mechanism for coaches to file complaints against us for harassment. And every time I get one of those complaints, it's at night, meaning that the parent and the coach has gone back and forth over an extended period of time, usually by text, late into the evening. As a real person, I will tell you, I believe alcohol is consumed during that period of time. So when I coach coaches on this, I say, what are your office hours? You deserve boundaries, but your parents do deserve to be able to contact you. And I do not allow coaches to have any office hours after 8 p.m. You see, so they have to earn our respect. It's a relationship. Whereas I find coaches expect us just to feed into and be like, yes, sir. Right. And then coaches on the other side just complain about us. So this is a big divide that we all need to work on closing that gap so that that boundary is more clear and more positive.
Allison, you have so much experience, you have so much knowledge, and you have so much expertise in so many areas across sport. Of course, we're going to put it in the show notes, but while people are watching or listening, if you can just tell them how they find out more about what you do and how they can empower themselves in creating safe sport environments for their children.
Yeah. Okay. So I am someone who has done a lot of customized work, and now I've been at it for about 3 or 4 years. So I am moving onto an online platform that'll be ready in about 3 months. This is going to sound very grassroots of me, but I'm a very grassroots person because I've been in the work. But you can obviously check out our website at generationsafe.ca. Further, you can just look at my own personal Instagram, which is Allison Forsyth. It's sports, it's all these things. And then on LinkedIn, I have Generation Safe sport. But I think the big thing is go to your club. It does not have to be me. I do believe, and this is honestly, Scott knows that I will tell you 9,000 million things I'm not good at, but I am good at what I do. So, but there are other groups out there for sure. But your number one thing as a parent, to be honest, is to encourage and enroll your club. That's who usually hires my company, right? Where I do the coaching education, the parent education, the athlete education, hello social media, okay? The administrator education comes through from an organizational client. So go and tell your clubs that you need a good dose of safe sport.
Allison, thank you so much. I've learned so much in this conversation. I think I can speak for everybody who watches or listens to this that they will as well. And there's so much more to come. So thank you for helping create better sport parents, but also more importantly, thank you for the work you continue to do and the passion you pour into this every single day. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Last thing I'll say is I don't want to ever come across like I'm telling people how to parent or what to do. So when I speak the way I speak, I'm just speaking from direct experience. And I think that having our kids in sport is absolutely awesome. So that's the foundation of all of this. Sport is a great place. We just need to be mindful of the challenges and how we can show up in that space.
I hope you got something useful and tangible that you can apply to your own journey in becoming a better sports parent. The easiest way for you to support this podcast is for you to subscribe on whatever channel you're watching or listening. And the fastest way for us to grow and reach more parents and help them become better sports parents is for you to share it with those you see at your sporting events or those in your network. Until then, happy sports parenting. And remember, have fun. That's what it's supposed to be about.